Imagine this. You walk into a crowded room, laughter bouncing off the walls, conversations flowing like rivers you can't quite dive into. Everyone seems to know what to say, how to say it, when to lean in and when to pull away. But you stand there not awkwardly but deliberately still. You scan the room not looking for someone to talk to, but wondering how they all find it so easy. Not just to talk but to care. You don't feel lonely. You feel distant. Not because you lack empathy but because you see too much. It's not arrogance. It's not shyness. It's something else entirely, something no one talks about because those who experience it often can't describe it, and those who don't could never understand it. There's a strange contradiction buried in your chest. A hunger to connect, but a refusal to settle for small talk. A desire for belonging, but an aversion to conformity. A craving for truth, but a world dressed in filters and masks. And so, instead of playing the social game, you retreat, not into isolation but into observation. Into solitude, not as a prison but as a sanctuary. You read, you think, you ask questions that others avoid. And somewhere along the way you start to realize, the smarter you become, the less social validation means to you. But here's the paradox. Humans are social animals. We evolved in tribes. Our brains are wired for connection, empathy, collaboration. So why do some of the most intelligent, introspective minds grow increasingly disinterested in the very thing we were supposedly built for? Why does deeper understanding often lead to greater detachment? Why is it that the more one sees the mechanics behind the performance, the incentives, the insecurities, the unspoken social contracts, the less inclined they are to participate? Is it wisdom or is it alienation? And here's the most uncomfortable question of all. Is something wrong with you? Or is something wrong with society? Most people would say you're just being antisocial, that you lack emotional intelligence, that you're overthinking it, that you're missing out. But deep down, a voice inside whispers otherwise. That voice says, maybe it's not you. Maybe you're just awake in a world that's sleepwalking. After all, what is a social life today? A curated Instagram feed, a calendar filled with obligations, conversations soaked in performance anxiety, friendships that rarely cross the threshold into raw truth. A culture of surface-level warmth masking an epidemic of emotional emptiness. So you begin to withdraw. Not because you don't care, but because you care too deeply. You crave conversations that touch the soul, not the weather. You long for silence that doesn't feel awkward. You want to sit with someone and not have to speak and still feel understood. But those things are rare. And so you become rare. The world may see it as detachment, but inside you're orbiting a deeper question. What is the cost of fitting in if it means shrinking your mind? Perhaps smart people don't avoid social life because they think they're better than others, but because they feel burdened by a truth others are unwilling to see. They recognize how groupthink slowly erodes originality. They see how social rewards incentivize conformity. They feel how most conversations are shields, not bridges. And so they ask themselves, what am I really connecting to, people or personas? This question haunts them, because while others fear being alone, they fear something far worse, being surrounded and still feeling utterly unseen. Maybe that's why they don't chase social approval. Not because they think too much of themselves, but because they've seen the price of becoming someone they're not, just to be accepted. But here's the catch. Solitude isn't always salvation. It's easy to romanticize isolation, to pretend we need no one. But deep within the walls that intelligent minds build to protect themselves, another voice whispers, am I hiding or am I healing? That voice lingers. It questions whether the rejection of the social world is an act of wisdom or a wound left unhealed. That's where the tension lies. Not in whether smart people can have a social life, but whether they should want the one society offers. And that's the question we must now explore. Because beneath this silence, beneath the solitude, lies something deeper. A hidden force that has shaped not only your behavior, but your very sense of self. And it's time to drag that force into the light. What if the real reason smart people don't care about social life isn't just about intellect or preference, but something far older, far deeper, and far more unsettling? Beneath the surface of every human interaction, there's an invisible architecture. A web of expectations, roles, and scripts passed down through evolution, culture, and subconscious fears. Most people follow them without question. But highly perceptive minds often stumble upon a terrifying realization. Much of what we call social life is theater, a performance, a collective illusion. It's Carl Jung who first introduced the idea of the persona, the social mask we wear to navigate the world. According to Jung, every person has an inner self, raw and unfiltered, and an outer self, crafted for acceptance. The more intelligent and introspective a person becomes, the more they begin to notice this split, not just in others but in themselves. They feel the weight of the persona. They feel how conversations bend under the gravity of ego, how authenticity is often sacrificed on the altar of politeness or popularity. And slowly, a dissonance begins to grow. This internal tension between what is real and what is rewarded creates a kind of psychological nausea. It makes the typical social environment feel hollow, like eating food without flavor. And so, like a body rejecting poison, the mind begins to recoil. But this withdrawal is not rooted in arrogance. It's rooted in truth detection, a subconscious instinct to flee environments that demand inauthenticity. Now imagine living in a world where inauthenticity is the currency of belonging. Herein lies the hidden problem. Smart people don't simply find social life boring or draining. What they often experience is spiritual suffocation, a world that demands they trade curiosity for consensus, depth for likability, solitude for popularity. Nietzsche once said, "Insanity in individuals is rare, but in groups, parties, nations, and epochs, it is the rule." When you begin to see the madness embedded in social norms, it becomes harder to participate in them with a straight face. The empty greetings, the forced smiles, the constant need to perform happiness, the social rituals that mean everything to the group and nothing to the soul. Now add to this the existential burden of awareness. As Jean-Paul Sartre argued, self-awareness is both liberation and torment. The more you see yourself and others clearly, the harder it is to engage in illusion. Intelligent people often carry this burden. They become hyper-aware, not only of their own thoughts, but of the unspoken dynamics swirling around them. They walk into a room and feel the hierarchy. They sense the subtle power games. They detect the invisible pressure to conform, and something inside them refuses. But here's the catch. Awareness doesn't just liberate, it isolates. Arthur Schopenhauer once described intelligent individuals as people who find solace in their own minds because they are overstimulated and underwhelmed by the company of others. Not because others are less than, but because the world they live in is built on a rhythm that their inner tempo can't match. It's like trying to dance to a song you've outgrown. Yet this psychological detachment is not without pain. As Gabor Maté has explored, especially in his work on trauma and addiction, the desire for authenticity is in constant conflict with the desire for attachment. When the social world demands you abandon your truth to be accepted, your psyche splits. And that split can fester. It shows up as cynicism, as apathy, as intellectual superiority, sometimes even as depression. But at its core it is grief. Grief for a world that does not reward what you value most: depth, sincerity, truth. So what do intelligent, sensitive people do? They retreat. They build inner castles. They read, they write, they think. They wander through forests of thought where no one follows. And in that wilderness they begin to ask a dangerous question. What if social life as it's currently structured is not just shallow, but deeply harmful? What if the modern social landscape is training us to suppress our individuality in favor of applause? What if the noise of connection is drowning the music of self-discovery? That's when the most unsettling realization begins to form, not as a conclusion, but as a feeling that seeps into the bones. If I want to be myself, I may have to walk alone. This is not misanthropy. It is not disdain. It is a psychological rebellion, one that grows silently in the minds of those who refuse to dilute themselves for belonging. But it comes at a cost. The human psyche is not a closed system. Jung warned that suppressing any essential part of the self, especially the shadow, the unconscious aspects we deny or repress, leads to internal war. And sometimes, the rejection of social life is not just about rejecting society, but about rejecting the parts of ourselves that crave recognition, intimacy, and vulnerability. So we must ask again, is solitude our salvation or our shield? Is the disinterest in social life a sign of evolution or emotional injury? Do we pull away because we've outgrown the game, or because we never learned how to play without losing ourselves? These are not questions with easy answers. But one thing is clear. What we call social disinterest in the intelligent may actually be a form of silent suffering, a quiet rebellion against a world that demands masks, and punishes mirrors. But what if this rebellion holds the seed of transformation? What if this very detachment is not a weakness, but a compass pointing toward a different kind of connection? We're not there yet, but we're close. Because once we see the hidden problem, we can begin to see its consequences. And those consequences are shaping not just our personal lives, but the very structure of our society. You don't notice it at first. You think it's just a preference. Maybe you're introverted, maybe you just like your space. But then it begins to grow. Slowly, invisibly, like vines creeping along the walls of your mind. What starts as harmless solitude becomes a lens. And that lens starts to color everything. People's laughter seems forced, their conversations empty, their ambitions shallow. You smile, but it feels performative. You engage, but inside you're distant, detached, watching the world unfold like a play you no longer believe in. This is the first unseen consequence: alienation. Not the romantic kind that artists and philosophers often boast about, but a deeper, more unsettling kind. A slow erosion of emotional intimacy, a hollowing out of connection. Because once you begin to see through the social illusion, it's hard to unsee it. You notice how conversations are rarely about truth, but about validation. How most friendships are rooted in convenience, not understanding. How even love often comes with terms and conditions. And you begin to ask, if everything is performance, what's real anymore? This is the psychological price of clarity. The more clearly you see, the more deeply you feel separated, not just from others, but from the very scaffolding of society. You become an observer in a world of participants, a philosopher among salesmen, a poet among merchants. But the mind is not built for permanent exile. Viktor Frankl, the Holocaust survivor and psychiatrist, once wrote, "When a person can't find a deep sense of meaning, they distract themselves with pleasure." And that's exactly what modern society offers: distraction. Distraction disguised as connection. Infinite scrolls of curated lifestyles. Performative empathy on social media. Group chats filled with noise but void of nourishment. Memes in place of meaning. The world has created a synthetic version of intimacy, fast, frictionless, and fake. The intelligent, introspective individual quickly realizes that what most people call community is often a feedback loop of approval seeking. That groupthink is not a bug of society, it's a feature. And that fitting in sometimes means fading out. So what happens next? You begin to withdraw, not just socially but spiritually. Your inner world becomes richer than anything the outer world offers. You lose touch with the rhythm of the crowd. You stop caring about birthdays, office parties, casual hangouts. You tell yourself, I don't need this, and perhaps you don't. But slowly, something unexpected begins to decay: your empathy. Because empathy is a muscle, and muscles atrophy when unused. Without shared experiences, shared laughter, shared pain, you begin to theorize about people instead of feeling them. You understand humanity, but you don't touch it. You become wise but distant, sharp but cold. And this is where the most tragic consequence hides. Wisdom without warmth, truth without tenderness, a mind awake but a heart asleep. This is the intellectual desert, and many brilliant minds have wandered it. Schopenhauer lived alone, despising the noise of society. Nietzsche spent much of his life isolated, writing about humanity while watching it from afar. Even Dostoevsky, though deeply empathetic, often wrote from a place of torment and psychological solitude. But what's most haunting is this: the very traits that make someone perceptive enough to reject society also make them susceptible to suffering without it. Because human beings are not ideas. They are mess, emotion, contradiction, flesh. To fully understand the psyche is not to dissect it under a microscope, but to live among it, breathe it, feel it. And the more you retreat from this mess, the more sterile your truth becomes. So what do? Do you plug back into a system you know is broken? Do you pretend the masks are real? Do you deny your own mind for the comfort of company? There's no easy answer. But ignoring the consequences doesn't make them disappear. Let's go even deeper. There's a neurochemical reality to all of this. Humans are wired for social interaction. Oxytocin, dopamine, serotonin, these chemicals regulate not just mood but identity. Prolonged isolation, especially the kind chosen as a defense mechanism, alters these systems. You start to feel numb. Not just emotionally but existentially. Your sense of time distorts. Your priorities shift. You begin to exist in abstraction while life, the raw, unpredictable, chaotic thing, happens elsewhere. And suddenly you're not just avoiding social life. You're avoiding life itself. It begins subtly. You stop responding to texts. You lose interest in small joys. Conversations feel like chores. You become addicted to thinking about life rather than living it. This is the trap. And the trap is elegant, because it feels like freedom. You think you've escaped the herd. You think you've transcended social games. But in truth, you've just built a new cage, one made of logic instead of love, of analysis instead of aliveness. This isn't to say smart people are wrong to feel disillusioned. They're not. In fact, their instincts are often accurate. But clarity without connection is a dangerous thing, because you can understand everything and still feel nothing. And that's the paradox. The more clearly you see the dysfunction of the social world, the harder it becomes to be in it. But the more you avoid it, the harder it becomes to heal the parts of yourself that crave it. You start to live in echoes, in shadows of possibility, in ideas of relationships rather than the messy, beautiful reality of them. The world becomes a mirror maze of mind games, and you're left wondering, what part of me did I lose in my pursuit of clarity? But here's the turning point, because even in the heart of this isolation, a question begins to rise from the depths. Is there a way out that doesn't require pretending? Can I engage with the world without betraying myself? Can solitude become my strength, not my shield? The answers lie ahead, because buried within this quiet rebellion is not just loss, but potential. A chance to rebuild a new way of being, one that honors your mind without abandoning your soul. You've seen through the illusion. You've walked the desert of insight, bearing the loneliness that comes with clarity. But now comes the most dangerous temptation of all, staying there, living in the ruins, building a temple from your detachment and calling it peace. But what if rebellion doesn't mean retreat? What if the real rebellion is returning, with your eyes still open? Most people think awakening means leaving society behind. But true awakening, dangerous, unapologetic, radical awakening, means facing society again and choosing your role deliberately. Not because it's expected, not because it's safe, but because you understand it and you're not afraid anymore. Imagine a soldier who learns that the war is a lie. He could run, disappear, become a ghost, or he could walk back into the battlefield, not as a pawn but as a strategist, as someone who knows where the bullets come from and why. This is what smart people must become, strategists of society, not its victims, not its exiles. So, how do you break free from the trap without betraying your insight? Step 1. Redefine connection. The mistake many brilliant minds make is assuming that because most social interaction is shallow, all of it must be. This is false. Meaningful connection exists, but only if you're willing to seek it, risk for it, and create it. Carl Jung spoke of the individuation process, the lifelong journey of becoming whole. He didn't mean becoming isolated. He meant integrating the full self. And part of that self is other people. Jung also warned, the greatest burden a child must bear is the unlived life of the parents. But let's stretch that. The greatest burden a mind must bear is the unlived potential of connection. The world will never offer you perfect people, but it will offer you mirrors, flawed, fractured, but real. Use them. Find others who have glimpsed the truth and didn't collapse under it. Seek minds that are awake but still open, discerning but still soft. Don't look for comfort, look for friction. Look for fire. That's where growth lives. Step 2. Use solitude as fuel, not refuge. Solitude is sacred, yes, but only when it sharpens you. Only when it turns into a forge, not a coffin. Nietzsche said, "He who has a why to live can bear almost any how." Your solitude must serve your why, not your fear. Right. Think, reflect, but then emerge. Use your ideas in the world. Test them against experience. Because a philosophy that can't survive the messiness of reality is just a fantasy. You are not meant to become a monk in a cave. You are meant to become a warrior of thought in a world that fears thinking. Step 3. Redefine value. One reason intelligent people withdraw is because society celebrates the trivial. Influencers with nothing to say, performers with no soul, the loud over the wise, the many over the meaningful. But here's the truth. The world only changes when people refuse to abandon their standards. You don't need to lower yourself to engage. You just need to build your own arena. Don't fight for attention in spaces that reward mediocrity. Create your own context. Write the book others are afraid to write. Have the conversation others are too distracted to start. Build the thing that doesn't yet exist. And let that become your social life. Not quantity but quality. Not performance but presence. This is rebellion, not rejection. Step 4. Embrace the shadow. Carl Jung taught that what you avoid within yourself becomes your shadow, and the shadow grows stronger the more you suppress it. Many intelligent people suppress their desire for connection, their need for love, their longing to belong. They dismiss it as weakness. But this is the root of the wound. To fully know yourself is to accept that you need others, and that doesn't make you fragile. It makes you human. Let the need live. Let it breathe. Let it ache if it must. Because in that ache lies the gateway to transformation. Your mind is your sword, but your longing, that's your compass. And if you're brave enough to follow it, not blindly but consciously, you'll discover that the thing you feared most wasn't society. It was vulnerability. And vulnerability, when chosen with clarity, is not weakness. It is alchemy. Step 5. Reclaim play. In all this depth, don't forget this. Seriousness is not the same as wisdom. Play. Walk. Dance. Fall in love with the absurd again. The intelligent mind, when untempered, becomes heavy. But life has rhythms, and sometimes rebellion means letting go. Trusting the flow. Surrendering to joy even when the world is burning. Don't just dissect life. Feel it. Don't just critique the world. Touch it. This is what Schopenhauer missed. What Nietzsche almost found. What Dostoevsky felt in his bones but never fully articulated. The goal is not to escape society. The goal is to dance with it, without letting it lead. So rise. Let your mind stay sharp. Let your solitude remain sacred. But let your heart crack open just enough so that something human can enter. Because here is the final paradox of rebellion. The smartest people often leave society not because they don't care, but because they care too much and they haven't yet found a way to carry that pain. But now you can. And in doing so, you become more than just an outsider with insight. You become a guide, a bridge, a whisper of truth in a noisy world. And that is the rarest role of all. What if everything you believed about solitude, intelligence, and the rejection of society was never about intellect at all? What if the root was something far older, far deeper, a wound you forgot you carried? Because beneath the sharp observations and cutting insights, beneath the late-night thoughts and detachment from social rituals, lies a small voice, ancient, quiet, often silenced, and it's been asking the same question all your life. Am I too much for this world, or not enough? You see, the truth is, intelligence does not protect you from suffering. In fact, it sharpens it. You notice more. You think more. You feel everything. So when the world seems shallow, performative, chaotic, your instinct is not arrogance. It's protection. You step away because you're trying to survive. You mask it as independence. But what you're really doing is retreating from the overwhelming noise of existence. The philosopher Alan Watts once said, "You are an aperture through which the universe is looking at and exploring itself." But what happens when that aperture becomes too narrow, too filtered by intellect and defense? You don't just lose connection with others. You lose connection with life itself. The final truth isn't about intelligence or social behavior or personality. It's about your relationship with reality. And here's the paradox that breaks the loop. You are not here to transcend humanity. You are here to embrace it fully with eyes wide open. You are not meant to escape society forever. You are meant to see through it and then love it anyway. Not because it's perfect, but because it reflects the chaos within you. Carl Jung said, "The most terrifying thing is to accept oneself completely. But the deeper terror, one few dare admit, is to accept others. To see their ignorance, their shallowness, their fragility, and still offer your presence. Still choose to engage. Still love. Because here's the real truth. The smart ones aren't here to abandon the world. They're here to heal it. But healing doesn't come through sermons or superiority. It comes through participation. You teach not by escaping the system, but by showing a different way of being within it. You become the calm in the storm, the depth in the noise, the clarity in the confusion. You become the person who knows that popularity is empty, that small talk is often armor, and that societal roles are paper masks, but who still chooses to meet people where they are, not where you wish they'd be. Because that is the final evolution of intellect. compassion with discernment, connection without compromise, love without illusion. It's easy to love ideas, harder to love people. But that's the work. And when you finally walk that path, no longer running from the world, no longer defending against it, you'll find something staggering. A new kind of silence. Not the silence of isolation, but the silence of peace. Because now you know, you're not detached because you're broken. You're detached because you see clearly, and now you can choose consciously. You can sit at the edge of a crowded room, not out of fear, but as a witness. You can speak when it matters, not to perform, but to offer. You can build your own rhythm, your own way of being, with no guilt, no shame, no performance. And if connection comes, beautiful. If it doesn't, you're still whole. This is not about becoming social. It's about becoming so internally rooted that the world no longer defines you. So when someone asks, why don't you care about social life like others do? You can smile. Not with superiority, but with calm. Because you know the truth. You cared too deeply. And now you've learned to carry that care wisely. You don't need to escape anymore. You see through it. You walk within it. And finally, you belong to yourself. That's not loneliness. That's freedom. And maybe, just maybe, that's what the world needs most right now. Not more people fitting in, but more people who stand in truth, quietly, unwaveringly, without apology. So go. Be one of them. Because in a world that runs from itself, the most radical act is to face it, feel it, and still choose to love.